people were converted from the Zook revival, and now they wanted to be baptized. A natural feeling. We were saved, and now we want to be baptized. The problem was, this was January. And the practice of the Brethren of Christ at that time was to immerse in open water. How were you going to manage baptism in January? Well, S.R. Smith, being the intelligent man he was, arranged for a section of Trout Run just before it goes into Yellow Breeches. Do you recognize the bridge there? The southern entrance, the old entrance. This is a creek just before it runs into the Yellow Breeches. I don't know on which side of the bridge this occurred, this side or the other side of the bridge. I'd rather think it is the other side of the bridge, because Smith had his employees in his factory section off a small section of the creek. Next picture. And then this is the factory in Grantham. No longer standing, of course. It burned down in, what, 1946, 1947. He had his men run pipes from his steam engines in the factory, run hot water from the factory into, back to the, back now. No, back.
Yeah.
Back. Back to the creek.
There we go.
Had them run hot water into that section and warmed that water up just enough so that they could be baptized. That shows strong religious commitment, it seems to me. That was really the beginning of the Grantham congregation. Congregation formed soon after that with Smith as bishop. By the way, if you think that that is strange to baptize in winter, if again you went to the archives and start paging through the Evangelical Visitor, there are several stories about breaking the ice in winter and being baptized through the ice. Would your commitment to baptism be that strong, I ask? Probably not. Mine wouldn't be that strong. Okay, the next picture. About the next one now. This is a photograph of George Detweiler. He was a Canadian, came to the States, came to Kansas to be one of the early editors of the Evangelical Visitor. He eventually retired from that and joined the faculty. He had by that time moved to the retirement home in Harrisburg, which became Messiah Village, and he became a member of the faculty. Among other things, he was dean of men in the dormitory in Old Main. My father tells me that one morning the fellows woke up and all along the floor, the corridor of the men's dormitory, were small pieces of paper. As dean of men, Detweiler tried to find out which boy did that, of course, to have him sweep it up. But he couldn't find the man. So Detweiler simply got a broom and swept it up himself. Somebody asked George Detweiler once, how do you mark exams? I suspect that this was a student who asked the question. How do you mark exams? Although I'm not sure it was a student. Well, he replied, I give him as many marks as I can, and then I add just a few more. Here was a person who was very concerned, very tolerant attitude towards students. Okay, the next one. Enos Hess, you recognize Enos Hess? He was the first academic dean of Messiah College and later president. A deeply religious man. Do you catch the theme of deeply religious attitudes of Messiah College? He studied at Penn State University, Penn State College at that time. It was really an agricultural college. And even at college, carried that strong religious feeling with him. For example, he wore his plain clothes at college. The Brethren Price plain clothes at that time. He helped to bring Dwight L. Moody to Penn State to hold a revival meeting. Can you imagine that? Moody at Penn State holding a revival meeting? That blows my mind, but Hess was in on that group that brought Moody to Penn State. He always prayed in the dining room before eating. The story is that one day another student's mother visited her son, and her son said to her, "I want you to go to the dining room with me today because I want you to see a student who prays before he eats." It was obviously quite a sight, but there he was praying even though no one else did so. He outspokenly opposed hazing at Penn State. And I think it was this that led some students to go after him one day, chased him to his room where he barricaded himself behind a door to protect himself from those students. And apparently he was so religious at Penn State that they wouldn't include him in their yearbook, student yearbook. Deeply religious man, first academic dean of Messiah College, later president. He was a very generous man. He worked several years at the college, the first years, I think it was 4 years, without any pay, just to get the college started. In later years, he would, from time to time, return part of his low salary, and when I say low, I mean low salary. They were still low when we came in 1963. And he hired students to work on his farm so that they would have money to get through school here at Messiah College. Some of you will know where his farm is located. Do you know where the new president's house is? That was the Hess farm. One of the first students who worked on the farm for pay was Ira Zerker, who was the father of John Zerker, who married Alice Grace Hostetter, and the grandfather of a member on the faculty now, David Weaver Zerker. He helped him get through school on his farm. He was very self-sacrificing. He grew potatoes, and in order to have income for himself and some more money to give to the college, he sold the large potatoes and kept the small potatoes to eat in the family. When his suits got threadbare, instead of buying a new suit, he saved money, and I think it was Mrs. Crable who told me this. He saved money by taking tape and taping over the patches that looked bare. Okay, the next one. Virtually everyone here will recognize Dr. Hostetter, who became president of Messiah College in 1934. He came at 1/3 of the price of the income that he was making as a salesperson. He had at one time sold peanut butter for a Lancaster Mennonite bishop by the name of Landis. But when he came to Messiah College, he was selling calendars and was making something like $3,000 a year selling calendars in the Depression. Somebody must have liked calendars more than Leona and I like calendars at this point. But he came to Messiah College at 1/3 of what he was making at that time as a salesman. Tell something about his persuasive powers, it seems to me. And he came despite the fact that these were the Depression years, the height of the Depression, and he had a family of 4 young boys. He obviously needed to make sacrifices for both the college and for himself, financial sacrifices. In his first years at the college as president, he insisted on a salary below some of his top salaried faculty. I think it was below the top 5 salaried position. He insisted on that kind of a salary for himself. And in some years, he returned part of his salary to the college. He too had to be careful about his clothes, only he took a different tact in keeping them in shape. He always, I think this changed in later years, but he always wore black suits, as you may remember. And when they became threadbare and the white began to show through them, through the suit, he would take black shoe polish and rub that black shoe polish over those bare spots to save money for family and for himself. And while he traveled, he didn't stay at the best hotels. He stayed at YMCAs, where he took a room in which he shared a bathroom with other residents of the YMCA. Instead of a good hotel room with his private bathroom, YMCA shared the bathroom. He was a people person. As some of you, is Dorothy Jean Sullenberger here? No. It was Dorothy Jean Sullenberger who told me, she was his secretary for a number of years. She told me that he had an open door policy. An open door for both faculty and students. And that he never gave the signs, the little signs, to a faculty or a student that it was about time that they were to leave. Do you know what I mean? Were you ever tempted if somebody came in, talked to you, and they stayed too long and you wanted to give a sign that they should go? I've often thought about that, particularly when I was archivist. People would come into my office in the archives thinking I had all the time in the world to talk. And I would want to tell them, in effect, it's time to go, but I thought of C.N. Hostetter. I tried to act like him. Okay, the next person. One of Martin Schraub's greatest contributions to Messiah College was to call us to our church heritage, and particularly our Anabaptist heritage. We really didn't know what Anabaptism was until the middle of the previous century, the middle of the 1900s. In my research, I've gone through the pages of the Evangelical Visitor I don't know how many times, and I have discovered that the word Anabaptist did not appear in the pages of the Evangelical Visitor until the 1940s. But it was Martin Shaw who told us our background was Anabaptist and instructed us in that background. Martin Shaw, from that background, taught us peace. Taught us more about peace, I think, than what we had known at that point. He had himself served in World War II as an MCC representative in India and in Indonesia. He wrote a book with John Stoner entitled The Ministry of Reconciliation. I'm sure some of you have read that book. My brother Robert taught at Messiah for a few years and shared his office. He shared an office with Martin. He said, I would often talk with Martin about peace. And he said, for every question I raised about peace to Martin, Martin had an answer. Martin, relatedly, I think, taught us to look outside of ourselves. He was the first on the Messiah College faculty to really mingle with the African American people in Harrisburg. In fact, there were 2 or 3 African-American congregations where he would preach from time to time. Became great friends of Dr. Duncan. I think Dr. Duncan is no longer living, but he was an African-American preacher of is there a Macedonian African-American church in Harrisburg? I think it was pastor there. Also relatedly, Martin argued against flying the American flag on campus. American flag was flown on campus, and Martin took up this issue. He argued in various ways. One of the ways he argued was, we need to practice what we preach, separation of church and state. And he said, we need to consider students from other countries, make them welcome, make them feel that they are as much a part of ourselves as American students are. And if we don't fly the flag, that will help in that kind of a relationship. He loves sports. That was rather hard for me to consume, that a gentleman like Martin Schrog who loved sports. I found out that he played football at Bethel College in Kansas. So I said to him one day, Martin, isn't there an incongruity between playing football, he played guard, playing football, and your main purpose was to knock the other fella down? His reply was, oh yeah. But he said, that gave me a chance to reach down and pick him up. And put him on his feet again. A man of peace. Next photograph. You recognize Earl Miller. Earl Miller, it's obvious, did for music, did Messiah College for music what Martin Schrog did for peace. He introduced music early to Messiah College. My parents were students here, as I said, in the early 20s. My father told me that he remembered the Miller family coming to sing at Messiah College as a men's quartet. Earl with 2 brothers and their father. And Earl must have been very young to have done that. Earl Miller and Ron could say more about, Ron Sider could say more about this than I, but I've heard it said from various sources that he taught the brethren in Christ, not only here, but across the denomination, that music can be more than just the gospel songs that we sing. And a good example, it seems to me, is his beginning of the oratorio, the Grantham Oratorio. My understanding is that the first oratorio was in 1949, singing of the Messiah in a forum in Harrisburg. Is that right? I can remember that because Leona and I, in our senior class at that time, Terra Bible School, now NCC, we made a class trip to that oratorio, and that was one of the first dates that my wife and I had, this trip to Pennsylvania, to hear that. He was well known for his music groups. The one that I best remember are his men's choruses. The next picture. And here is one. You'll probably recognize some of these pictures. Do you recognize some of them? Let's point out a few. I can recognize Louis Sider. Is this Hartman Landis? I think so. Is that John Gribble?
Norman.
Norman?
Norman.
John Garman, right. Is this a Boggemuth? Howard Boggemuth? Well, you'll recognize others. I think that this, pardon me? Is Bill Hope there?
Yeah, he's there. Second row. Second row, the third one from the, you're in the wrong row. The middle row.
Middle row.
The middle row. On over. On over. No.
Oh, there, yeah, okay. Martin up here, and Carlton Whitlinger over there with the, yeah, well, we can spend the rest of the period on it. I think this is the choir that came to the little congregation that I grew up in, Cheapside in Ontario. And I mean, it was little. But that men's chorus packed out that little building. I remember distinctly that not only were the seats filled, but they had benches down all of the aisles. A great, great event for this little plain church in rural Ontario. Well, we boys, I and my two brothers, were so impressed with that we pretended that we were Earl Miller and this choir. we would go to the steps, the stairway going upstairs. Two of us would sit on the stairs, and the other would stand at the bottom of the stairs, and we would try to be as dramatic as Earl Miller was in leading this little choir. It made a great impression. He was a warm friend to both students and faculty. The first person who met me when I came on campus, when I came down here to teach in 1963, was Earl Miller. This man whom I had always admired, greatly admired at a distance. He was the first one to meet me. We kind of ran into each other, and he gave me a very warm welcome to Messiah College. And then a few years later, when we built our house near to where he and his wife were living, one afternoon he invited Leon and me and our two girls to go with him in his boat and ride up and down the Susquehanna River. A very warm friend, and it seems to me that characterized his relationships with everybody, including students. Next one. Carlton Whitlinger. It was Carlton Whitlinger who brought me.
We like the pants.
What was that?
They like the pants.
Well, he was more than his pants, like that. You must get your mind on something else here. He was the one that brought me to Messiah College, for better or for worse. He was an excellent educator, excellent administrator, as some of you will know. I'm convinced that he was so good a scholar and administrator that he could have gone to any college or university in the United States and had a successful career there. But he chose to come to Messiah College. It says something about him and Messiah College. He made some very definite contributions to Messiah College. It was he who really took the lead in getting the first accreditation for Messiah College in 1963. He led in the first philosophy of education statement for the college. At one faculty retreat in my early years, he insisted that that retreat be on how we relate our disciplines to our Christian faith. I happened to be chair of that retreat, and at the end of the retreat, we did an evaluation. And the evaluation was fairly good, except that Earl Miller, when it came to his term to evaluate this retreat on the linkage of faith and our discipline, said, "It was the most boring thing I ever lived through." Well, coming from Earl Miller, I could take that. He was concerned about students. You know that he died shortly after giving his last chapel talk. The occasion of that last chapel talk was his walking through the woods behind the campus and seeing some of the activities of couples, student couples there. go into that, but he was very concerned about that, and so he asked to give a chapel talk, and was so exercised about his concern for students that with his high blood pressure, that reacted very unfavorably, and after walking out of the chapel, he collapsed and died in the foyer in the gym. Well, another man who was very concerned for students, Virgie Crable. Next picture. Who lived just across the railroad tracks from Old Main. She wasn't really a member of the faculty or a student, but she was virtually part of Messiah College. Story I like that she once told me was that when Old Main was being built in 1911, she and some of her girlfriends came by the construction and saw them laying bricks, and she asked the workmen, let her lay some bricks, which she did, and so she tells me 2 of those bricks in Old Main were laid by me. I failed to ask her what bricks those were. I think they should have been gold-plated, given who she was. For some years, she worked as the head cook in the kitchen. She provided garden space for faculty, particularly in earlier years. That was true for Leon and me. We came at a salary of $4,000 a year for the first year. We needed some help. She gave us through Homer, gave us a large section of her garden. I don't know how many quarts of vegetables we canned or froze that year. Very generous. For most of her years, she was a single mother with a large family and quite poor, as Homer has told us on occasion. And yet, she always had an open door for students and people in the community. I understand that young people at the college or other young people on campus and in the community, if they didn't get enough to eat, they came to Virgie Crable. And poor as she was, she fed them. Obviously a concern for students. Next one. There were many church-related activities at Messiah College. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute or two. But the point I want to make is that for some people in the Brethren of Christ Church, these activities provided their honeymoon for them. One couple who came to a Bible conference at Messiah College for their honeymoon was to attend this Bible conference at Messiah College, was Mary Long's parents. Is Mary Long here? No? Okay. Her parents, the Stearns, took their honeymoon at Messiah College, as did E.J. Swallam and his wife. This is after they're married, of course. But they took their honeymoon from Canada, all the way from Collingwood down to Messiah College to spend their honeymoon here. For the Brethren in Christ, Messiah College became a kind of Niagara Falls for honeymooning. By the way, you'll recognize some of their children. This is Leila, this is Jean, this is Ray, and this is Mildred. This is Ernie's sister, Pearl. Next picture. There wasn't a lot of athletic activity at Messiah College. In fact, in the early years, virtually none. When some of the students asked for some planned activities in sports, there was a member of the trustee board said, listen, if they want some exercise, let them chop some wood. That will give them exercise. But eventually, there were some activities, like you could go walking in the trails in the woods behind what is now the church, but you could also go swimming. This is one of my favorite Messiah College pictures. If you're old enough, you know where they're swimming. There's a dam to the west of the college. If you went across Highway 15 now to the Gettysburg Pike and just go down about a half a mile before you get to the railroad bridge, if you would cross the fields, in the old McCormick estate, there was a dam. And this side of the dam was a good swimming spot. And the fellows would go swimming there. And you will recognize some of these fellows, I think. Maybe not in these clothes. Talking about pants. These are swimming suits. This is J. Lester Myers. This is Amos Steck. This is Landon Steckley. This is Howard Mann, Leroy Mann's father. There are probably others that you could recognize. My father tells me, my father swam with some of the fellows in this dam. He said one day we were out swimming and Henry Heisey, the minister, the father of D. Ray Heisey, disappeared in the water. My father said, I jumped in and rescued him from drowning. I always thought as a boy that was a great hero, my father rescuing somebody from drowning. But it also means that by rescuing Henry Heisey, we had D. Ray Heisey, a great addition while he was here to the Messiah faculty. Let's go back to events at Messiah College. There were things like love feasts, graduation, Bible conferences, and other meetings. And people, for the days when everybody had a good automobile, they would come to Grantham for these events by train. Can you imagine that at one time on this railroad there were 5 passenger trains a day, so I'm told, and this was the Grantham Railroad Station. Next picture. And here are a group of church people who have come to one of these events. The students from the college would come down and meet these people and walk them up to the college. And then at mealtime, while they were eating, these people were eating, the students would sing for them. Very nice touch. I don't recognize any of these except this man, and this is P.J. Wiebe, who was in at the founding of all 4 of the Brethren of Christ schools. I must show you a picture of a train wreck. That's part of Messiah College, bringing people to the campus, interrupting music events with a loud whistle. Do you remember that? But it also meant train wrecks. Here's one in earlier years. If you knew Norman Winger, the relief worker, do you remember his limp? His family was crossing the railroad tracks coming to one of these events, and they didn't get off the track in time, and he was injured by a train. After we came in 1963, there were 2 of these wrecks. There hasn't been one for a long, long time, and they probably have got that fixed up. There is a legend connected with these train wrecks. It is that in one of them, one of the cars was loaded with alcoholic beverages. It tipped over into the creek, and all the fish got drunk. I call that a legend. I don't think there's any proof for it. Well, what are some generalizations we can make? What I've been trying to do is give you kind of snapshots of people, their characteristics, representing Messiah College. How can we generalize on that then? What do they tell us about the character of Messiah College? Well, obviously they say that there is a long and strong religious tradition of Messiah College. If we're a religious school now, there's a reason for that. That's part of our tradition. There's been a pattern of good management. Presidents down to the current one have been good managers. We have these buildings. We have a good endowment, etc., etc., because the college has been under good management. In my early days, we used to have an annual event which celebrated the culture of a certain country. I forget what country it was, but to do that event, we had a couple of professors from Penn State to help us with that. They came down, they looked at the campus, and they told my brother Robert, who was in charge of this, they kind of sneered at him and they said, in a couple of years, you guys aren't going to exist. Well, we're existing, and my point, of course, is that's partly because this college has been under good management. It's had a caring tradition. The faculty, the administrators, have had a concern for each other and for students. Relatedly, there's been a concern for peace and reconciliation. Think of John Zook. Think of Martin Shaw. Think of all of the faculty who have worked towards that end. There's been a tradition of sacrifice, working at minimal pay so that the mission of the college could be accomplished. There was a mission that you worked for, and that often, particularly in earlier years, you worked for much less than you could get elsewhere. The meeting of faith and learning. The meeting of faith and learning. Highly educated people giving themselves to the Christian mission of the college. They could have taught elsewhere at college, university, but they wanted to, with their education, make something of that connected with the faith. And of course, think of Carlton Whitling on that. And so my point would be that these are all ongoing traditions of Messiah College.